This episode of the In Focus series features John Demicoli. John is one of the leading MCs for combat sports in Australia, working across Thai boxing, kickboxing, boxing, mixed martial arts and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu events. We are live.
Great to see you.
Giving up your
No,
Friday
it's
night.
a pleasure. It's a pleasure, man. This takes me back to the original Rebellion. One of the most amazing first shows I ever went to. It was a cracking night at this venue, the Red Scooter, and I hope it stays open post-COVID. Please, Red Scooter, stick around. We want to see you back.
I've got a bit of a backstory with this photo, but before I get into it, can you just briefly tell me how you got into MCing? Just very quickly summarize it leading up to this very point here.
Yeah, I was working at the Crown Casino as a promotional host. I was, and they wanted microphone workers, and I always liked to be on the microphone. Never done it professionally, and I was used to do a lot of the promos at Crown. So done a lot of VIP shows, VIP events and stuff at Crown Casino. My brother Joe and Paul both being promoters. I was brought up in the fight world. So one week, my brother calls me and says, my MC Perry can't be there next week. Could you do it? And I went, yeah, not sure if I want to do MCing. And had a visit from Perry who gave me some videos on the shows he was doing and stuff. We had a good chat. Brother Joe gave me a crack and done the show. Had an absolute ball doing it. And then the wonderful Michael Vukovic was at the show and he said, hey, I got my show next 2 weeks. Do you want to do my show? Done Michael Vukovic shows for like probably him alone for a year solid. And then it just started snowballing. Here we are all these years later and I'm sitting next to the great man yourself at ringside or cage side literally every other week. And it's been a great time and I've had an amazing journey. I've loved doing what I've done and can't wait to get back to it, Willie. I'm sure we both can't wait. That's
awesome, man. Speaking about Perry, he was already MCing when you were starting out. Out of curiosity, how many years was he doing it before you jumped in?
I'd say, I could be wrong here, I'd say 5 or 6 years. I grew up watching Howard Lee. Howard Lee MC'd my brother Paul's shows and Johnny Sheet at our team. Yeah. And I loved seeing Howard Lee do his stuff. I never thought of being an MC. I always liked, as I said, speaking on mics and stuff. But I still look up to Howard Lee like a legend these days. People probably don't know, we actually catch up at Melbourne Cup every single year, me and Howard Lee. We spend about a few hours together at the Melbourne Cup. He always comes and meets me at the 100-metre mark where I always am, but unfortunately his health has taken a bad turn. He wasn't there last year. So Howard, if you're out there, mate, g'day, buddy.
You had Perry Carroll back then when you started out. I had, mine was Terry Borg. He's been doing it
Terry.
Decades before I was doing it, and I was like a little kid sneaking in. So, but the backstory before, with this one here at the Red Scooter with our good friend Sai Naji.
Yep.
Well, this was actually the first. Oh, good old Johnny. This was actually the first show that I shot by myself. And I was surprised anyone would ever give me the opportunity to be at a show. And I think I pestered Sai to work on his show for weeks and weeks before his show started. And I think the week of his show, something happened or whatever. He asked me, hey, are you free to do the show? I'm like, yeah, sure. I didn't know what to do, but I've been studying Terry's game for a long time. I even stuck into your brother's Ultimate show one time with my gym. I didn't pay for it. I just walked in and had my camera, began shooting for our gym, but also watching Terry very carefully because I knew I wanted to be ringside as well. So I was just studying what he does, his mannerisms, his routine. When I got this Rebellion gig, I was told to do the weigh-ins as well. So I did the weigh-ins, but on that same night, I had to go to a Kings of Combat event. So after the weigh-ins, this was my mistake because, when you do, nowadays, I know when you do weigh-in photos, you must upload them the same evening or the same night. Otherwise, there's no more relevance. They fight.
Exactly right.
I sent mine like the next day in the afternoon. So after the weigh-ins, this was the last show of the year. There's always a nice thing about having last shows of the years. Everyone wants that big finish.
I think we've both been lucky, Will. I think we both came into the sport not long between each other. And we're lucky to have people who are great in the sport who we could, look at until they do. I saw Perry do a lot of shows as well before I did. So I saw his style. Obviously I knew Howard Lee's style and obviously I was a massive WWE fan growing up, a WWF fan. So I loved how the announcers on WWF worked and Michael Buffer and all those other guys and Jimmy Lennon. So I always liked it. Never knew I'd do it, but lucky to be surrounded by really good people and people who got me to it. And like your good self, we've had a great career in doing this for the last, 10, 12 years, man. It's been great.
Has it been that long?
For me, I think my first show was in 2008 or 9, which is now my 11th year.
One of the
So
first shows I've been to was, I think, the last Fight For show by Michael Vukovic at the Queensberry Hotel on a Mother's Day
yeah,
bash.
Mother's Day Mayhem. I actually
Yes.
co-announced that show.
Yes.
And that I remember the show leading up to it was it was on the news, like, you know, how dare they have this Mother's Day Mayhem.
Yeah.
It was called Mother's Day Massacre originally, and they changed to Mother's Day Mayhem. I remember walking into the show and there was like reporters at the front wanting to talk to us about the naming of the show and they all thought it was gonna be some sort of crazy, I don't know what they were thinking, but of course in the media get blood of something they want to attack, and that was a good night. What was the main event? It was Taz Tsitsipas.
It was a tag team, I believe.
No, it wasn't tag team. It was the main event was Taz. I know that it was a big night. That was a massive show.
It was a big one.
And that was probably my first big time show. I remember I felt pretty special walking into that venue, and it was I think
that was one of my first shows too. It was either Prosecution or that show. I remember being a young kid. That was my first year even training in fight martial arts, and just standing in the crowds watching everyone having that Fight Force Gladiator theme song going for every fight. That just it just dragged the whole night out. So I was standing for hours and hours. And then ever since then, I was like, I'm not going to be paying for standing tickets anymore. I'm going to try and get closer and closer.
But the thing is, as far as, you either loved it or hated the actual lead-in. As far as staffing went, like video guys, photo guys, photographers, MC, commentators, when you heard that 1 minute lead-in, you knew it was time to go. There was no way you were in the venue. You knew there was a fight coming.
Yep.
So it was a great thing for the staff, for all the talent and everything else to know, hey, when that starts, we're ready to rock. We're ready to go. So that was a good thing about that leading music. And it was pretty cool, the gladiatorial music. I didn't mind it.
Especially in that venue as well. But let me just quickly finish this story about you. So after the weigh-ins, I went straight to Kings of Combat, watching on the nosebleed area, seeing the fights happen. And I remember seeing a particular fight. I saw Terry shooting. I was still watching my friends compete, but also watching Terry very closely, how he does things. I was learning from the best just so I can perform the next night, doing like my last minute studies. And then there was a fight with Cal Costa. I think maybe Eric Diamondstein. Cal Costa did a very nice spinning back kick, knocked him out. I said to myself, if I was ringside, I could get that. Come to the next night at Rebellion, I walked past you, and I knew you from the Fight Force days, and I heard you saying to somebody saying, how about that spinning back kick? And you said, I remember you said very loudly, Terry Ball got that perfect knockout shot. And I'm thinking in my head, man, I wish I got that too. I wish I had that too. That was my goal since then, and maybe one day Johnny might say something nice about me.
My God, I think by now I've said, now I've said a lot of nice things about you, Mr. William Liu. You've definitely just catapulted yourself to the forefront of photography. I think what you do, and I've said it many times, I think there's people that can take photos, and if you click a camera and you take it enough times, you're going to get that shot. And there's people that can take the sport of Muay Thai, especially, and what you do in the cage, and turn it into art. And I think what you do is you capture the shots and you make it so artistically fantastic. Like you actually turn the sport from if you want to call it barbaric, from a fight, but you actually turn what you do into art. And that's what makes, I think, what you do pretty spectacular.
I appreciate that. I think that comes from I'm a fanboy at heart, and I'm sure you are too. I think we're both in a very interesting position, how we're both very involved in the sport, but we're not fighters and we're not gym owners or trainers, but we act the sport in a different way.
I've always said that the day I don't enjoy myself being ringside, I won't be ringside anymore.
Yeah.
As you know yourself, I run a business. I do my weekend work as a fight show to get away from what I do during the week. I love my business. I love also being at the fights every weekend, and I really miss it. At the moment, especially now during COVID lockdowns, I am hanging so bad to get back, be it the ring or the cage, and just to be with the people that you meet. Like, we've met so many amazing people. You've made friends from the board members to the judges, to the referees, to the trainers, to the fighters. Like, when you're there at the start of the show, you know yourself, I'm trying to get my work done. They're writing all the stuff and get my notes down, and all the trainers walk past and you're like, "G'day, Johnny," and you're having a chat and "G'day, mate, how you going?" And
they become friends. They become good friends.
Family. Yeah, we're all, such good mates. And right now we're not seeing each other. And when people ask me, what do you like the most about the MCing? MCing is great, but it's the people you've met and the really genuine people. And it's all people, especially Muay Thai, especially. We're all like a big Muay Thai family. Like, people aren't fighting Muay Thai to make millions of dollars, but it's such a passion. It's life for these people, and to be amongst it and to be in the back rooms and seeing the Muay Thai trainers with their fighters, and it's just a different vibe to any other form of combat sports, in my opinion.
I completely agree, but you can't say that unless you've seen all disciplines, and we both have, and I completely agree with you. There's just the amount of mutual respect from both parties.
I'm not taking away from boxing or MMA. I'm not doing that at all. All I mean is I love all forms of combat sports. I freaking love doing what I do. But when you've met friends from all different walks, and just that, so there's something it's a little difference in Muay Thai, which gives it that really different family vibe. Like there's a different relationship between trainer and fighter, and just seeing that, it's exciting to see. It's like, it's just a different thing. And people ask me, what's the weirdest thing and what's the best thing you do? And being at weigh-ins what do you think of weigh-ins yourself, Mr. Lou? I'm the non-fighter. Weigh-ins are a different kettle of fish for all different combat sports as well. Like
in terms of what? In terms of capturing, or in terms of the weigh-ins itself?
How it works, like it's amazing to see when you're at weigh-ins. We're going off. I'm sure I'm probably going off your little.
Don't worry, I can cut and whatever. Just go for it.
When you're at a weigh-in, I just find weigh-ins amazing. It's such a weird thing that you got fighters who have been literally starving themselves for a week. They walk in looking all gaunt, and everyone's like, "Hey, mate, how you doing?" And it's such a different to fight night. There's such a different vibe at the weigh-in. Once they get in their scales, I love seeing the guys get on the scales and the girls get on the scales, weighing up.
There's all these nerves going through the mind, that nervousness, like seeing their opponent for the first time. They might think, "Oh, am I better than them? Are they better than me?" So what you see with them on a regular day, they might not be themselves when you see them. So I think the main thing I'll learn is don't take it to heart if they're very blunt with you or very whatever. Just let it go.
And as soon as they reach that weight, you can just see the stress just leave their body, and they're like, "Johnny, what's going on? How you doing?" And it's just that excitement, and I love like seeing the difference between walking in, and I think anybody can appreciate, and I can't appreciate, I'd never cut weight and done what they have to do to cut their weight, but just to witness a fighter go through those emotions leading up to the scales, getting on the scales, weighing in, and then seeing that emotion to change completely to a bit of elation, and they've made their weights, and now they're ready to fight, and just their mindset changes, and now it's fight time. Exactly. And I love being a part of that and seeing that when I can actually get to weigh-ins, which doesn't happen often, but if it's a Friday night show, I'll be at the weigh-ins on the Thursday. But normally, if I'm doing a Friday show, I can't be to the Saturday night show weigh-ins because it's done the night before. So, but yeah, I like being at weigh-ins too. It's good fun.
It's become more of a formality too. When I maybe in the first year when I started, I never liked to go to weigh-ins. I felt like it was a waste of time as a photographer. But then the more I appreciated the sport, I know it's just as part of fight night as it is the whole thing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I'm sure from yourself, you see a lot of the UFC style weigh-in and photography creep into our sport more and more in Australia. And I think it's a good thing for the sport. It's made the sport just kick up that next cog and, just make it look more professional. That's where you step in as well and do your thing in photography.
I try to. Let's quickly talk about this boutique venue. So prior to this event, you were doing a range of shows from pubs and hotels. Was there anything special that you liked about this venue? And did you see any special signs on your first Rebellion show that was going to go places?
Yeah, Red Scooter. My favorite thing at Red Scooter is that bar area looking at the camera to the right-hand side, to see sponsors, to have a chance to sit at a bar, and literally the bar is up against the ring, and just be so close to the action. That's what I love at Red Scooter. And then the intimate venue of the Red Scooter. So if you were ringside, there was no more than 3 rows of tables or chairs. Literally, there's no tables, like the chairs are right there. Even the cheap seats, as you called them earlier, there was no such thing as cheap seats at Red Scooter. The first Rebellion 1, you knew you were watching something special. There was some cracking fights. And I remember watching, who was that main fight? Was it Fanous?
Sam Edney and Kim Johnson.
Yeah, I remember Johnson-Edney fight, and I was like, wow, this is crazy. And the crowd, it was probably the first Muay Thai show, full Muay Thai show.
It came at the right place at the right time. This was when I was still fighting. They promoted themselves as a full Muay Thai show, no pads, no Muay Thai, and it was very different. There wasn't any imageries at the time, but they just wrote that, and that was enough to attract people's attention.
Yeah, it was really good. It looked classy, and the whole event was classy. It was very well run. But I've been blessed to be at so many amazing shows. be it kickboxing, boxing, or cage fighting. I count my blessings to be at so many good shows around Australia, and there's some great shows, there's some okay shows, but we've got a lot of good shows in Australia. I've got to be very careful here, Will. You know that?
Yeah, I know. I'm very careful myself. Now, like I said earlier, we're both...
Can we change this photo of me, Will? It's not the most flattering photo of myself here, Will. I'm not going to lie to you.
We're going to go for order photos, mate. Like I said, we're both really embedded in the industry where we're both fanboys at heart. You know, going on social media and doing our own research. We become friends with many people. So sometimes we don't even have to do many research for fighters because we know what they are, we know where they're from, we know the trainers, we're friends with them. You were talking about all those notes you receive before shows. So here's an example of one of them. How much, just talk us through what's it like for you going to the venue and deciphering through all those notes and like checking out the names, records, and then interpreting that and then saying it as you've known them for like 100 years?
Yeah, so what I do is only a couple of promotions actually pre-do all their notes. The first show I worked for, they'd done all their own notes, was Evolution. Evolution MuayThai in Queensland. It was quite funny. It's a good story. So they'd hand out the fighter their sheet and the fighter would write down all their details. They could write down what titles they held, they write down everything about the information. And you'd get the version from Nugget. So Josh Sexton, who was running the show, and Nugget sat on a chair in the back rooms and he'd go, Mr. Demicoli, here's the notes, mate. I remember the first show, he gave me these notes and it was all black marks, like thick text marks through all these titles. And he goes, listen here, Mr. Demicoli, if you mention anything that I've marked with black, you're off the show. He goes, don't mention bullshit titles unless I let you mention them. And he'd only circle the titles I could mention. And he said, I don't care what the fighters tell me. You just say what I told you to say and don't mention any bullshit titles I've told you that I've marked out black. I don't want to hear it. So it was cool. It was the first actual show that I actually had what that suit. So most other shows, I'd either go to the weigh-in or I would go on the night before the show and run around to all the fighters' notes and just go, what's your fight name? What gym you train at? What's your weight? Everything else. And I just write. And then I'd quickly rush down and write it all down. These days, a few shows do all that pre for me, be it Rebellion, Hex, AFC. When I was at the Wonderful People, Epic in Perth, those guys write it down. So you know what you're saying, it's great. You can actually have it all done. I get to the show, it's all finished. Something I do hate is rushing.
Can I just interrupt? I think people don't realize, they don't think you're just a voice. You got to do all the research yourself sometimes, like physically writing down these things to say it on a night. And then there's, I write everything down. So I like to have my show my way, like it's in with my own little tableau of doing things. So in a perfect world,
all the details, I then write it on my little notes. I take a photo on my iPad and I use my iPad. Any notes that I have extra, I'll just jot it with my finger on the iPad and I'll have it on the picture and I'll go off that. I have to get all the fighters. Most of the time, we're not, a lot of the shows, they don't give you any details. You got to do every single, there's 12 fights, that's 24 fighters I have to chase either at weigh-in or if I'm at the show, pre-show starting, I've got to chase those 24 fighters and ask them every question. And a lot of the time, I've never met the fighter.
You don't know.
I might have had 4 or 5 fights. And I don't know everyone's record. I don't keep tabs on everyone's record. If I do, then on my iPad, I'll go back and see the last fight. But they may have had 3 fights in between that. And, we're not talking about fighters that are going to be on Sherdog or BoxRec. So a lot of these guys, you actually have to physically ask.
Yeah.
And a lot of fighters say, I don't know. How many fights you had? Don't know. Okay. How many losses you had? I don't know. And you're like, okay. Any idea? So sometimes you just don't know, and you got to try to search those fights.
It's almost like someone saying to me, "Hey, can I buy my photos?" Yeah, sure. Which one did you fight at? I don't know. What show was it called? I was wearing red shorts.
Go through all your photos, Will, and just bloody look for them.
He was wearing red shorts, Johnny. Can't be that hard. What's some of the trickiest things that you had to memorize or get down? Would it be name pronunciations?
Names, Thai names, and Sai, if you're listening. We'll
get there. We'll get there.
The Thai names are crazy, like Sit Sompanong and all the names, and you have to actually get it right. I remember the first ever boa I done. It's an embarrassing story.
Please say that. I'm going to get to that in a second.
I'll rewind then. I'll stop that. We'll go to that.
Yeah. Let's just move on.
Go.
Like myself, working ringside, sometimes you're sat next to a lot of the officials, doctors, timekeepers, sometimes the VIPs. What's it like sitting ringside, just seeing the people around you work?
It's really interesting, man. Like, everyone takes their job so seriously. Right now, I'm sitting next to Tommy Davis to my right and Chris Anderson Jr., Little Sledge. Tommy Davis and Sledge are so passionate about timekeeping. Like, these guys come to the show. A lot of the time they're separate. A lot of the time they work together. But these guys are so serious about their job. It's just like everyone that sits ringside, no one understands that everyone a part of our sport is so passionate about what they do. No one's making millions of dollars in Melbourne doing shows. Like, we do a lot of it out of love for the sport and to try to grow the sport in the city, in the country. But, like Tommy Davis runs a car yard. He's a car salesman. Chris Anderson is his life. He does his stuff. But when they get to the show, he's a timekeeper and he's passionate. I'm an MC. I love what I do. You're a photographer. You love what you do. Well, we've got our own day jobs. No one's doing this full time, making this as a career. We do it because we love it and we love the sport that we're a part of. And I love the fact that everyone involved in this sport, and when I say the sport, I mean any format of the fight game, we all do it because we love it. Yeah. And the day you stop loving it, it's probably time to give it up.
I say to everyone, I have as much passion shooting the very first fight as I do the very last fight of the night, whether it be midnight or 1 a.m., 2 a.m. If I don't have that level of passion, I wouldn't be doing it. I'm just sitting there clicking a button. I'm actually still enjoying the fights. Enjoying how things are playing out at the very last fight. So if I start slacking, it's going to show in my work, and then it'll just give me a bad look, and that's when I'm going to hang it up,
And that's like, like when you sit in ringside, you can be sitting next to the doctor, you can sit next to the ring card girls. You sit next to anyone, but everyone you sit next to has a job. And people that don't take it seriously and don't love what they're doing, you don't normally see them ever again. No. And that goes from, well, I suppose your board members are there because they love what they're doing, they love their job. But sometimes you have a ring card girl who's probably like, oh my God, I'm dying, this is shit.
We've seen that. I can tell. I'm sitting ringside. I can see everyone ringside, and both you and I, we know our roles very well. We know when we're meant to be working, and we know when we can have a breather. And in that times when we're relaxed, talking to people, mingling. But when I'm shooting, I'm really focused. I'm relaxed during the breaks, like yourself. It's time to switch on like seconds before the round ends because that's when you need it. Little cues like that, I pay attention to it. Yeah,
you have to, man. And you need to be switched on all the time. Like, you need to be ready to go. And as you said before, fight 1, fight 12, the main event, you need to, that fighter in fight number 1, the opening bout of the night, that could be their first ever fight. And that's going to be a memory that lasts forever. And something I don't realize, I actually had a fighter that came on to me in one of the shows, and he's retired now. And he said, oh my God, he goes, you emceed my first ever fight. And I was so excited to be that first fight, and you gave me the most awesome rev up. It was so cool, and it got me so excited to fight more and more. And I felt really cool. And then what made him is even more exciting to me, every now and then when I've got a chance, I love doing amateur boxing or amateur kickboxing, like an amateur night.
Yeah.
And there's nothing more rewarding now that I've been in the sport for a long time of doing an amateur show. And I think I'm probably the only MC who's been working this long, and, I've done a lot of pretty big shows, but I'm still happy if I can to do an amateur night. And when I'm at an amateur night, I love it. And I didn't realize how good it was when one of the fighters who was like 18 or 19, his first fight, was like, I've been watching MC since I was 8 years old. And I can't believe you're MCing my first ever fight. And it's an amateur show. He goes, I can't believe it. Like, you've MC'd so many big fights and you're my first ever MC. And I was like, damn, I never even thought I don't consider myself, like, I'm just an MC.
Yeah.
But for kids growing up in the sport, like, I look up to Howard Lee, and I look up to Perry Cale in Melbourne, and Dave Aller in Queensland, and you can go on Jimmy White in Sydney. As much as we probably don't think that what we do is big, for young fighters growing up, when you MC their fight, you're who they watched, loving the sport. So it's awesome feeling to know that you're MCing someone's first fight. We don't realise how important it is to them, and we're just a part of the entourage that happens at the night of the show, but it's pretty cool to have that feeling, I suppose.
What I'm doing is very different to you, but I've also had many fighters for the first time saying, hey, I was so nervous my first fight because I knew you were shooting, and I was so glad to get that W.L Fight photo because they've seen guys like Alexi Petrulius, Roy Wills, Wayne Parr having my photos, and then they're like, wow, I can actually get a profile picture by him. And I get that. I'm very flattered. Like I said, you never know who's having their first fight, and you want to treat that as a big deal because it is a big deal for them. And
I remember some shows you go to, you see the MCs sort of not be half-assed, but wouldn't happen in Melbourne, a couple other shows where the first 5 fights, they basically MC the fights from the floor and they don't get into the ring. And there's only like 10 fights in the card. And I'm just like, it's not fair to the first 5 fighters not doing that. In saying that, I know I've been a part of shows that had like 21 fights on the night, and they've said to me, a quick MC for the first 10 fights and then do the last 5 fights full. And that's what the promoter has asked for. But I just really want to give every fighter that walks in the right introduction and to make them feel special. Because I think every fighter that goes into those ropes or goes through the cage door, they've done the hard work and they deserve every aspect of their fight night to be special for them.
That's the cool thing about both you and I coming from like fight backgrounds. You've got your fight family. We know what it takes to go into the ring, and you're not being paid a shitload, taking on those risks as well. So, like I said, everyone that goes through the ropes deserves our respect, and we want to do
100%, man. It's one of the most common questions I get asked from people that aren't fight people in Victoria. It's like, do the fighters get paid heaps having fights? Do they get like paid a fortune? And I'm like, man, 90% of these fighters are just fighting for a little pay packet, and they do it for the love of the sport. A very small percentage make big cash out of this sport, and they do it because they love it. And the reason I do it is because they love it, and I love being a part of it with them and making their night even better. It's like, people have a very big perception that everyone's making millions of dollars in the sport.
Yeah.
Which we both know is not the right truth. But
Really?
it's a great
I didn't know that. I want to cut it out too.
You're driving the limousine. You're driving the Ferrari though, William Webb. How many times have you won Photographer of the Year?
Moving on.
Moving right along, Will.
You've done a lot of shows now, and this is one of the recent new shows that popped up last year, Hardcore Promotions by Mark Jelsey. What's it like for you when you're working on a completely brand new show from scratch? And I felt very honored too. Mark having his first show, he chose the people he wanted to work with. He chose you, he chose myself, and I felt very honored being part of the show from the first show up and building it there. What's it like for you working on a new show? Do you try to suss out the vibe? Do you give a different flair to it to try and give it its own look and feel?
100%. I noticed that with Mark Jelsey's show, when you're starting on a new show that no one else has ever worked on before, you have a feeling that it was like the original Rebellion, for instance. You knew you were starting up a new brand and a new style of show. The Mark Jelsey and his team, really good people to work with. It was a pleasure to work with him. And they had an amazing first show as well. You were at it up in Frankston, and it was a really massive first show. Good to work for the guys, and it was great to have Jelsey ask me what I think would make the show work better, how I would think he can make the show professional. So it's pretty cool to have a couple of conversations with Mark, and he took so much on board, not just from what I said, but he spoke to so many people in the industry, and he had such great background work with, of course, Joe Nader from Power Play, who got him into the sport as well, and it was he done a great job. It was great to be part of it, and I want to sound like a broken record, but I can't wait to get back to these bloody shows. I'm sure you're itching as well, Will.
I am, man. Out of curiosity, if you were to do Demicoli promotions like here, what would you do? What are some of the things that you would do to make a show run well?
I think it's all about organization. I'm a Virgo. I'm an extreme Virgo. I'm set in my ways. If I was to run a show, I think it's so important. The most simple things make shows work, in my opinion. At the end of the day, it's just two people fighting in a ring. It's the people around a show that creates a vibe, creates the feel. Once that bell, I think I said to many promoters who are new promoters, they're always so stressed. And I'm like, once the bell rings for fight number one, as long as the fighters keep coming out, your show's going to run. I'll guarantee that your show will run on time and run smoothly. If you can tell me the fighters are ready, I'll make your show run well. But don't stress. After that first bell goes, just chill. The crew around the ring, be it myself, Will, the people, the commentary, everything else, we'll make it work. I've done this before. Let me just use the people in the photo as an example. Yourself, the lovely Katie Jean, Milana, the video crew, and myself. Once we're in the ring to do the formalities for the fights being raised, we all know our part. You know exactly. You help me out a lot too by telling the fighters to come towards center stage, take a photo of me. The ring girls will help me set up the photo. After it's done, we all leave the ring. There's no fluffing about. No one's there trying to take time away from whatever is happening for themselves. And we all have a role to play, and that makes all those little seconds turns to minutes, turns to hours, and then leaves you leaving the show at 2 a.m. I think it's so important. You brought that thing up. You said everyone knows their job. I think the secret to longevity in this sport is do your job, make sure you do your job properly, help the people around you if they need it, but there's no need for the MC to tell the ring card girl where to stand and how to do it, unless she's never done it before. She's asked me. I've seen you stressing that so many times. there's no need for me to tell you how to do your job. I'm an MC. I'll do my job. You're a photographer, your job. We all work together as a team, and no one should step on each other's toes because I don't know how to take a photo. And trust me, I look terrible on a G-string and a bra. So I'll do my job, you do your job, and we all do it well. And there's no need for people to step on each other's toes, literally. Yeah. And I think that's what makes a cohesive team work so well. You work together as a team in the center of the ring, and the show runs really good.
Really well said. Couldn't have said it better myself. And that's a great team to work with. Everyone knows their part, and we get home by 10 p.m. hopefully.
Unless you're working on a rebellion show that goes till 3 a.m.
Yeah.
G'day, Si. How are you?
We talked a lot of kickboxing, stand-up. What was it like for you stepping into the cage for the first time? Did the cage atmosphere change the flow a little bit? You don't know where to look and.
Let me tell you the first cage show I'd done.
Let's go.
The main event. It was in Sydney. I started working for Kings of Combat with Hisham and Kelly Seif at the time. Kelly Seif ran a show in Sydney called Extreme MMA. Massive show in Sydney at the Sydney Entertainment Centre. Main event that I got to say his name was Daniel Cormier.
Wow.
So meeting Daniel Cormier backstage in the cage, and then to see his progression to becoming one of the most, he'll go down in history as one of the best heavyweights in UFC, Hall of Famer. Crazy. Like, I can't believe my first cage show was MCing DC. Another one.
We've actually seen a lot of superstars come from Victoria, like Hector Lombard, Izzy as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Hector Lombard trained with my brother Joey. Joey had him in his corner a fair few times on Team Ultimate shows. To think that he started in Australia, well, he fought in the Olympics, and then he stayed in Australia and he fought at Team Ultimate shows at the West End Market Hotel, and then went to Queensland and trained my other brother, fought on my brother Paul's shows in Queensland. And this guy's also was a UFC star, and we've seen so many amazing fighters, like, especially in the cage, like with AFC and Hex, like they account for literally all the Australia-New Zealand alliance that are in the UFC. So many of those guys cut their teeth in 2 shows that come out of Melbourne. It's amazing. It's so amazing to watch these guys and go, I MC that guy. And I must say, there's no bigger spectacle now in the world than UFC for the pinnacle of MMA fighters. And I suppose that's my little claim. Like, you know what? On this card, I've MC'd 6 of the guys on this card. And it's pretty cool. It's the only thing I can actually brag about, I suppose, in my sport, to actually people making it to the top and seeing Israel Adesanya. I MC'd Israel's 3rd or 4th fight in Melbourne on a Michael Vukovic show. Yep. He fought against Tim Antonio. If you haven't seen it, guys, go on YouTube, type in Tim Antonio versus Israel Adesanya. One of the best 5-round kickboxing fights you will ever see. Have you seen it, Will?
I have. Good old school kickboxing. Action pack from first round to last round.
Amazing.
Everything you'd love about Izzy, you'll see it there.
Yeah, he had the pizzazz. He had everything. And Tim Antonio gave as good as he got for 5 rounds. Like, man, he connected big shots. He ate some big shots. It was pretty cool.
It was a good one,
pretty
man.
Cool. Yeah.
What are some of the key differences you see working at it, besides the discipline, on your part as an MC? What are the main differences that you see? The vibe, the people, the organization?
Cage fighting compared to kickboxing?
Yeah.
The crowd's very different. I
tell people it's a mixture with boxing, a bit of kickboxing, the BJJ crowd, and a little bit of footy. So it's a weird mix.
It is, man. Like, I think the cage fighting crowd is mainly younger people that watch UFC. You get your gym. Obviously, every show has their gym members and their gym members' families. MMA has more of I'd say, a younger, cooler crowd that come to their shows because they watch it on TV and they come to watch the shows. It's a different crowd. Muay Thai has a more parochial crowd. I think people are more parochial in Muay Thai shows. Boxing shows are more of a corporate crowd. I think boxing's the one combat sport that still has corporate Australia cornered. Like, they have every Australian business and every Aussie bloke loves boxing. So they go to the boxing shows, but boxing shows normally will build up the excitement to the main event. So sometimes you'll be at a boxing show and the crowd is so flat, comes to the main event and you think you're in Madison Square Gardens, but that crowd has sat through 9 shows, 9 fights, not being as crazy and excitable. Where at a Muay Thai show, literally fight 1 to fight a 10 will be literally the same level of excitement. Cage fighting is the same. I like their level of excitement. I think cage in Australia, we still haven't quite got to the wrestling. Like people don't still appreciate like the groundwork on MMA. So I think it hasn't still caught on in Australia. We want to see action standing up all the time. We haven't grown up with it. Like Americans have grown up with like college wrestling. Australia doesn't grow up with college wrestling. Australians go, wrestling, is that fake? Because all we know about wrestling growing up is the WWF or WWE. And
I think people are slowly becoming more educated on that.
100%. It is. It's definitely catching on more. But I just think that boxing has that, like boxing has the news, has the sport, it gets on the papers where, you know, you can be, now MMA is getting there, but, you know, you could be John Wayne Parr and not ever get on the news. You know what I mean? These guys done everything there is in the sport, where you can have 15 fights and fight for a world title in boxing and you're on every newspaper and news broadcast. And it's so sad that all these fighters work so hard to get where they are regardless of the sport, yet some fighters get so much more newsworthiness from different media outlets than, you know, boxers. It's like boxers can get it. If they get to that point in life, they'll get what they'll get the exposure that they want.
Yeah.
Where, you know, people that fight, train just as hard their whole lives and do so much, don't get half as much. And it's just, I wish that we lived in a country that actually recognized their sporting stars as much as each other.
Well, that's something that this podcast is trying to do, shed some light on the, you know, unsung heroes. Let's pivot 180. Professional Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. This is something different for you. Luckily, I do train in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, not very active, but I know what's going on. So in my mind, I knew what Sai wanted to capture. He wanted to capture a professional fight night, but with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu athletes. And I had that pictured in my mind too. I remember talking to Sai about this when he was planning it. It was a very hard sell to the grappling community because prior to this, there wasn't any kind of professional nighttime event for this. It was only daytime grappling comps that you would be there for like 6 or 10 hours, mat at the mat, people are competing, everyone's talking. But they didn't understand what they were paying for. They didn't understand their ticket which was $50-$60 for a seated ticket to get you access to a premier professionally run show with 2 athletes competing at each other, announced by a professional MC like you would see at the fights. What was the experience like for you at this event?
It was a different show. I remember getting there and having taken
You're not even wearing shoes.
I'm not wearing shoes. I actually emceed in a suit and tie with no shoes, which was pretty cool. It was No Shoe Friday. I was in the western suburbs. I wasn't wearing Jordans when I got jumped in the train line. I actually got told to take my shoes off. It was a really cool night. I had no idea. I'd never been to a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu fight night. I'd never been to even what they normally have their shows on. So this is my first thing. So as far as I was concerned, I was going to give that night what I give to a normal fight show, which the fighters really took well to, I thought. One thing I did find hard, I'm not sure you're going to ask this question perhaps, but I wasn't aware of the pronunciations of some of the words, Brazilian words, and I looked like an absolute fool saying a couple of things that I said.
I've got to rewatch that.
Like Gracie Barra Jiu-Jitsu instead of Baja. I learned that very quickly. The R is a J. Guion, which Sai still talks about these days, of like, is it Guion or Gi off? I actually was saying this fight is Guion and this fight is Gi off. He's like, mate, don't. People can realize when they walk out, they've got no gi, or yes, they've got a gi. And I was like, I look stupid to other people. And then I've gone through, going through shows where I'm pronouncing every European 25-letter surname in like kickboxing shows, then to the Thai shows where I had some Thai guys I couldn't pronounce their names, but I learned to do that.
With the Brazilian name, it gives you a chance to roll your R's. I'm sure you love that.
Once I learned, I love to roll my R's.
What's harder, a Thai name or a Brazilian name?
Thai. Once you can pronounce a Brazilian, you learn what the letters actually mean. Look, one thing I do, I hate, I do make sure I do, I hate butchering people's names, contrary to popular belief to some out there. I will always ask a fighter how to pronounce their surname, and I will write it phonetically. Because I think growing up as a European guy, I think my surname's quite simple, Demicoli or Demicoli. But it's amazing growing up how many people butchered my names and every other WOG kid in the area. So again, these fighters deserve, when they get to the middle of the ring, to have their name said properly, because their friends and family are paying, and they're going to go and see William Lou, and they don't want to hear him called Will.I.am Louis or something. It's just not fair. So I like to make sure that the names are pronounced properly. that show, the Boa show, I butchered a couple. I'm not going to lie.
But again, it's a very humbling experience with all the experience you had from combat sports. It was almost like you're starting fresh again, and you still took on those feedbacks, those criticisms from people, and you learned going forward on the shows
100%.
too.
Yeah, 100, man. And you always learn. Yeah, everyone says I don't learn I learn every show I do. Like you learn something every single time, and the moment you stop learning, you stop caring.
You could have easily said this wasn't for me, and you could have just left. But no, you kept going back and you refined your craft.
Man, when they made me take my shoes off, I was a bit freaked out by that, but it was all cool. No, it was pretty cool. Bowl was a great show. I thought we'd see a lot more of it, and hopefully we do see some more of it when we're back in action in Melbourne.
I look forward to it, man. Center mat or center cage, same deal. I love how, not just yourself, but any MC, when it comes down to the main event, it's time to capture the audience, make sure everyone's still around, gauge their attention. And something interesting you told me a while back, you said that, say there's 10 fights, you don't want to, I know there's MCs like this, you don't want to announce every fight from fight one as if it's the biggest fight of the night. There's like a crescendo. You're building up. You don't want to...
You don't want to discount the first fight. You just want to give them something.
Yeah, you don't want to necessarily waste the audience time by getting the cheer. You do it when it needs to be. That's the main event. It feels like you save all your energy for the main event. What's it like for you come to the last fight to, get that energy?
It's man, it's pretty awesome. I mean, you're at a show. Some shows you're really let down by the vibe in the show. Like... You get to the main event, and there's nothing more gutting as an MC is that when you do your, we all have the way we have our key words and what we use to get the show, the crew, people fired up. There's nothing more gutting than when you go to the main event and you really you go, are you ready? And the crowd's like, woo. And you get like the sound of one hand clapping and you're like, wow. And I remember once, it's actually a show, I won't mention the name of the show, and I really pumped up the crowd much as I possibly could. And you could literally hear a pin drop. And when I actually said, it's main event time, and I was like, and I actually rolled my, I'm like, and I've turned to the fighting out of the blue corner. And I was literally gutted that I gave it everything I had. And I got like a sigh. It was like, yay. And it was like one person that clapped, and I was like, yay. And like I announced the fighters on both sides, and there was no more than like 20 people clapping to the fighters. And there was like a good full crowd. And I just went, wow, I don't know if I ruined this night or if they're just not feeling the whole evening. And it sucks. Like, because you want that main event to be as big as it possibly can. And that's what I want to do. Like, that's my only job I have. Like, at the end of the day, a wise man named Michael Chiavello, who I was blessed to know from a very early on in my career. I've known Michael was actually, he's talked about it recently, his first ever commentating gig was my brother Paul and Johnny Sheeter show at West End Market Hotel. Paul gave him the chance. He went and met him and said,
everyone starts there, hey?
Yeah, he said, he goes, man, I reckon you'd be great as an MC, like as a commentator. How about you come and give it a crack? So him and Tony Shebeki, who both went on to be very big in their fields, they cut their teeth on Team Ultimate shows at the Keilor basketball, or I would say Keilor, or maybe it was at the Macedonian Club or the West End Market. I'm not sure which show it was. But these guys...
The first show I stuck onto was the Western Hotel, so it all starts there.
It always starts at the West End Market. All fights start in the western suburbs, literally. He said to me, I actually asked him his advice. I go, Michael, I really want to do emceeing a lot more. What advice do you have for me? And he said, he goes, Johnny, remember, you are a part of the show. People are coming to see the fighters. Keep it about the fighters. You are there to make the fighters experience better. You're there to make the fight show, people paying public, their experience better. But at the end of the day, the show is about the fighters. It's not about you. Make it about the fighters. And you guys do your own thing. Keep your morals high, and you'll go far in this sport. And I've always thought of that. Like, it's about the fighters, never about the person. And I like to think that I'm there for the fighters, and all the fighters respect me, and they know that I'm there to give them a much better night if I can.
Yep. Maybe I'm a bit biased because I know you, but I feel like every name you announce, every fight you announce, there's some level of truth to that. You don't blow up some first fighter. You give them just the right amount of energy for what they're going to do. And, that energy gradually gets stronger and stronger towards the main events. And, whenever you're accentuating a name, there's going to be something behind that.
I don't know if you're getting this later on, but you know how I also MC my own event being the hip hop competition.
Yeah.
To the same thing. I sat in well, people out there who don't know, I run a performing arts school. We have a hip hop crew and we take our crews to different competitions. And our school isn't just a hip hop school, we do everything. So, but there's some really amazing schools that they have with great crews. And when we'd go out to those events, it was always an MC, and the MC would interview the known schools, the known crews, and he'd give them all the time in the world. And it'd come to some of the lesser known schools, and he'd be like, they'd finish their dance and all excited to speak to the MC, and he'd be like, yeah, mate, and he'd like usher them off the stage. I'm like, hang on a minute, these kids have trained as much as everyone else. You got to give them the same. These are children, and they're here to do stuff. So when I started my own hip hop crew comp, HUDC, Heavyweight Urban Dance Championship, cheap plug, I made sure, and I said, I will interview every single crew the same. I'll give them the same amount of time between every dance, because I want to make sure that every child that goes on that stage feels that they're just as important as everyone else. And I want to make sure that everyone feels important regardless of what part of the card they're in, and what I want to make sure I give everyone the same amount of respect.
It's almost like me. Everyone that fights gets a decent set of photos, unless they're lost in the first second, obviously. But I make sure I give them.
You give them the best knockout, them on the floor ever.
Yep. There you go. Speaking of knockout, you read my mind, mate. We've been ringside, cage side on so many shows, seen, crazy knockouts.
Yeah.
We've been so close to it too. And funny thing is, at Warriors Way, you always have the same spot every time someone gets knocked out. You have the best view of the house every single time. What's it like
There's
seeing
some very good knockouts? These are all at Warriors Way, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. And I was talking to Hammer about the smaller ring he uses. He was talking about how it helps with the show and all. But, we've been ringside on many knockouts. And for me, as a martial artist and former fighter myself, I might say I'm a bit jaded because I see it happen a lot. I know most of the times they'll be okay. There's a proper medical staff around them. But you can tell who's at the show for the first time because you can see that shocked look on the face. Like in this photo, you see Dr. Chris Barnes, Mal, Joanne. Everyone's really...
My face was pretty concerned there.
Yeah. Well,
I think Joanne was on counting, on the count, and I'll be going... There's been some great shots, Will, I must say, of my facial expressions at shows. I
love it, man.
And, I love it. I love a knockout more than anyone else. I love seeing... and I make that sound really bad. No one likes seeing someone get knocked out. But
it happens as part of the sport. You even see our Dr. Chris Barnes in the corner just saying, yep, another knockout. I've got to come in there and do my thing. Does it get easier for you seeing these things happen?
Yeah, man. I think it's second nature. Dr. Chris Barnes, I always love him being ringside because I always say to him at a Muay Thai show, especially, Dr. Chris, how many stitches you got tonight? He's like, I think I'm up to 44 stitches. I'm like, when this show finishes, within 3 minutes, I'll be in my car. You'll be here till 3 a.m. See you, Dr. Chris. And you sort of walk out. And people, these doctors, they're still a long time after the show. What's the worst knockout you've seen, Will? Am I flipping the script and asking you questions? But
no, you can ask me whatever you want.
What's the most full-on thing you've seen in a fight show?
I've lost count. Just maybe the ones where they had to bring in the oxygen tank. Maybe the Chris Bradford spinning elbow knockout when he knocked out the demon and that poor kid had to get...
Worst injury?
Oh, I see the worst injuries actually on novice and amateur shows. I think people are very tense. They don't fall properly. I've seen some guy have his elbow snapped and having the bone stick out from here.
I think the worst for me... elbow. I actually haven't seen an elbow snap.
Yeah.
The worst injury I've seen, I've seen it twice now, and it's probably 2 more times than anyone in their world to actually see live, is the shin split.
Ooh.
Like the shin breaking in half. I was in a show in Queensland. It was my brother's show, Eruption Muay Thai. I was at Legacy Muay Thai. I was one of the 2 he runs at a venue in Queensland. Heavyweight fighter, shin kicks, checks the kick, so the kicker lands his foot on the canvas and the bone just goes and cracks out of the
chills down his spine.
You heard that break. The venue to the back row heard the snap. This guy hits the deck and was just excruciating. Gotta love Queensland that there was he was taken out on a plastic table. So they folded up a table, rolled him onto the table, and they used a beer box splint around his leg and waited for the ambulance to come to pick him up.
Only in Queensland.
It was pretty crazy. And I remember that it was just mental. It was just crazy to see that. That was my first time I saw a shin live break. And then I done a show. I'm
Sorry, back to the shin crack. Did you have, as an MC, did you have to announce that? Did you have to address that?
Oh, well, everyone in the venue knew. It was a long time, so we had a long break. So basically, he was in the ring for quite a while. They had to wait for the ambulance to come. They administered morphine where it was, and then they carried him out of the ring and took him out. So obviously, everyone knew what was going on. But we obviously had a long break until it was all done. But there was also a second time that happened, was at a show in Chapel Street. What was the show? It's not on anymore. It was
Chases. I was right there. The guy happened right in front of me, Chapel Street.
Yeah.
Chases. Rise MuayThai.
Rise MuayThai, yeah. Remember
Cruiserweight guy. Someone. I know
from where he was from Westside MMA, Stuart Grant's fighter it was.
Yes, against Lenny.
I can't remember who it was. I remember that was really the first time, and no disrespect to his opponent, I can't remember who the winner was. I can't remember the guy who won that fight was. But I think it was the first time that I actually, as a worker, become how can I put this? When I'm an MC, I'm very, very, I don't get involved. I don't care I don't care what they do. It's their time in the ring. That night when that young guy broke his shin and was on the floor writhing in pain, to see his opponent run around the ring like he'd won a world title and was just like playing up to the crowd and high-fiving all his trainers. I remember walking and going, "Are you serious, mate?" And that was the first and only time I actually ever had to go. Not had to go. I was actually angry with one of the fighters because I'm like, you shouldn't be reveling in this. Like, it's not what this sport's about. Like, this guy's broken his shin. You didn't knock him out. It's come from a leg kick. What are you celebrating for? You should be down there with him, actually. And you shouldn't be celebrating this. This is not a celebration time. And I don't know if it was a right or wrong thing to do, but I remember actually being really angry that a gym and a fighter could celebrate such an injury. It just wasn't right to me. It didn't sit right with me.
Yeah.
That was my second worst injury, by the way. If we get back to the point.
I was talking to, I don't know if you know the other photographer in Victoria, Joshua Stebbings.
Yep.
I had him on a podcast, and he mentioned something about crossing the line as a worker. He said he was at a show one time as a photographer, and he saw one of his friends being abused or something, and he crossed the line and just shouted something inadvertently. But then he realized what he said after he said it. He said, "Oh shit, I'm not a fighter, I'm not a trainer, I'm just a worker. Know your place. Don't cross that line." And we both have it too.
But sometimes you're so passionate about the sport, you can't help what you do sometimes. And that happens sometimes, I must say. When I'm the first to know who wins the fight. Obviously, I get the fight card. I get the results from the.
You're always looking at your eyes when there's a close match. I'm trying to see what's your eyes looking. Are they telling a story or not?
There is no doubt, and I know. Thank God, the shows aren't on. A lot of them aren't live on Fox Sports or live on pay-per-view. Because sometimes I'll get a fight card, or a scorecard, and I'll look at it and I'm like, "Are you serious? Like how?" And I look back at the board and I'm like, "Are you sure it's not, you haven't swapped the blue and red corner over?" And it's none of my business. But as a person who loves being at shows and watches these fights intently, sometimes I'm surprised. I'm like, really? And I'm like, "And your winner out of the blue corner." And I'm like, you just know. I'm like, oh my God. So sometimes I've got to snap out of that and go, I'm an MC. I'm not in the crowd watching. You announce what you announce. So I make sure now I don't let whatever.
When you're calling out... Yeah, when you're calling out a controversial decision like that, do you ever feel some of the abuse from the crowds coming towards you?
I've had abuse I've actually been abused. I was actually once followed into the car park by a parent of a fighter at Chelsea Heights Hotel. So it was it was a shitty decision. And it's happened twice now, actually. Once at Kings of Combat and once at Chelsea Heights. The one at Chelsea Heights was a father, and he goes, and he had a go at me. He's like, "How dare you? You're disgusting." And I went, "Why?" And he goes, "You rip my son off. Every time he fights, you rip him off." And I went, "I don't rip him off." He goes, "No, you're ripping him off. Every time he wins, you don't say he wins." And I go, "Dude, I'm just reading out what the judges have told me." I go, "I don't pick the winner of the fight. I'm just given the results and I read them." And he's like, "You're no good. You're a very bad man." And I'm like, "Okay, cool. I'll take that on board and make sure I tell the judges next time that I'm a very bad man." And another time it was from a support of some drunken guys that really had a red hot go at me in the car park. And luckily there's a few security guards around and they pushed them away. And I was like, man, it's like, I just call out the scores, man. I don't make the judges' scorecards. I just read out what they tell me. And, in every sport there's controversial decisions. And unfortunately in a fight game, us MCs are the ones that have to deliver the good or bad news sometimes.
I don't envy what you guys do in situations like that, and certain shows in other suburbs. That's why I pack very light when it comes to shooting. And I'm not in the center ring. I'm not the one delivering bad news. I'm almost in the shadows. I come and go, and shows in the outer suburbs. I want to pack my things ready to go for the last fight, so I can get into my car and get out ASAP.
Yeah, that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't stick around. Sometimes, even in some of the boxing shows, when good old Matty Pilios is doing the commentating, doing the interviews after the fight, I have announced the main event winner, and by the time the interview's over, I'm already in the car going home. Like, I don't just stick around more than I need to. I've never ever sat after a show and had a beer with anybody. I don't think that's my place. I like to do my job and go home. I don't get involved in the after fight politics and stuff. I like just to head off. Some shows, if I'm not interstate, obviously we'll go out for a drink, but in Melbourne, I just believe in doing my job and then going home, man. I don't.
You keep reading my mind. Talking about interstate, this was the first show we went to together in Sydney. We almost shared the same hotel room, thanks to Andrew Parnham. He put us into a
We're almost head to toe buddies.
Almost, man. One of the perks in your position, and I guess my position too, is we get paid to travel interstate, and in your case, travel overseas too.
Well, traveling. I don't know if traveling interstate is a perk. It was a perk originally. I used to chase every interstate flight as much as I possibly could when I first started. When I first started, I was very proactive in trying to get shows. It's just natural.
You have to be. I suggested every show back in the day. I used to do those shows in the outer suburbs, like in Dandenong, and they'll finish at midnight, 1 a.m. I'd go home and do what I'm doing today and edit all the photos, be up till about 5 a.m., 6 a.m., post them up. Yeah. I happened to came at the right time because I understood social media at the time, and I knew I was up against some heavy hitters like Terry Bull. So I wanted to make sure I had to get up there. It just happened I was at the right time at the right place.
Yeah, 100%. One of the perks, I suppose, going to the States, great. I enjoy being with friends and family and my lovely wife and stuff. So going to state by myself isn't my favorite thing in the world. A lot of the time, I don't know the other fighters. So you sort of travel into state and people are like, oh, I had a weekend in Queensland or a weekend in Perth. Technically speaking, you fly out at like the 11 o'clock flight or 12 o'clock flight out of Melbourne, or the cheapest one they can find at 5 a.m. You can't check into your hotel at 2 o'clock. You get to the hotel, put your stuff down, you're at the venue by 5 o'clock. The show finishes at midnight and you're flying out at 7 o'clock the next morning. It's not like you're having a weekend away. The show's there, it's fantastic, but the actual surrounding it isn't always it's not like a holiday. So you're doing your job and you're going home. Probably the craziest show I'd done. I was lucky enough to travel with Mark the Hammer to Challenger MuayThai season 2 finale in Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, where Nugget was one of the trainers. There was Jordan Watson. There was some amazing fighters in that Abdullahi, Mustafa Abdullahi. There was so many good fighters. And to be in Kuala Lumpur was just crazy. Like, just to know, I flew to Kuala Lumpur, checked into a hotel. There was like the world's best Muay Thai fighters all in the hotel, having lunch with them all. And that was a crazy good week, man. It was so much fun. We emceed the show out of this very famous arena where Muhammad Ali fought.
It sounds like a boys' weekend.
It was a really good week. That was great because we had had junkets. It was great. Like, we had things to do. It was really big. I'd done a show in Vanuatu.
Wow.
That was an interesting show. We had a show. My brother Paul Demicoli done a show in Vanuatu, and I went up to MC that. And it was, my brother Paul does nothing in halves. Everything he does is fantastic. His shows are great. Organised this amazing show. Massive fighters from Melbourne were up there. Fighters from Queensland, Sydney. Cost a fortune. On the day of the show, a monsoon blew through Vanuatu.
Wow.
And Vanuatu was flooded. People traveling in Vanuatu on the back of utes, and not much there, the cars or motorbikes. There was literally at this venue, which we had seating for like 2,000 people. There was the fighters, the trainers. There was the prime minister of Vanuatu, or a president, whatever it may have been. A couple of chiefs of the local community, and that was it. Because nobody could get to the show. The show was completely empty. And one of the sponsors was Moet and Chandon. Moe and Chandon, the champagne. There was a bottle of Moe and Chandon on every table, pre-prepared for people that were there. And not one of those bottles were taken. But let me tell you, Johnny Demicoli took about 7 bottles of Moet and Chandon home for my lovely wife, and she was very happy when I arrived home with bottles of Moet and Chandon.
Good
Lucky.
man. Very good man. From start to finish, we're there from the first fight to the very end. And sometimes the emotion gets the best of you. What's it like for you sharing these moments to like, especially at the end of the fights with this fight in particular, it was like seeing in his 8-man or like a main event with Jabba on one of Peter Haddon's show. What's it like sharing these kind of moments with the fighters, knowing that this moment was really big for them?
I am I'm an emotionally excited person. I well up very often. I don't know if you hear sometimes my voice will break when I get overexcited. I actually not break of voice, but like just with emotion, like a little bit, I get a little lump in my throat. I remember when I emceed Kaylee Reese's last ever fight on Epic. When I announced her name walking out to the ring, I knew already in my mind, I'm like, I'm not going to get through this announcement because I had her whole career written down on my sheet. And halfway through mentioning all of her career highlights, I literally welled up in my eyes and I actually couldn't talk. I was like, and I almost started crying like in the ring because it meant so much to her. Me as a friend of Kelly's and of Kaylee's and Darren's, I knew how much it meant to them. And sometimes in the fights, when you're friends with the people and you know it means so much to them, it's hard to not get emotional. And because I know a lot of these fighters like Singh and all the boys and everyone else, and it does. It means a lot. I love being a part of their career highlights. For a lot of these fighters, these moments in the middle of the ring are their biggest moments in their lives. And it's you're lucky to be a part of that. As you're taking photos of that, you're capturing that moment forever.
Definitely.
And I'm in that background saying their names. It's pretty awesome to be a part of it, man.
Yeah.
It means a lot to me to be a part of it.
We're very privileged in those moments too, just to witness
100.
a great moment in their lives.
100%. And it's sad if you're working in this sport and you don't feel that emotion, because if you don't feel that emotion in this sport, maybe it's not the right sport for you. Yeah.
Just going back to the very first rebellion with all the cuts and goodness and sweatiness.
I know. I was very wide there. I was a much bigger Johnny Demicoli.
Oh, you look fine. I think I must have touched the photo.
Can you airbrush that chin out for me in the real version? Can you, mate?
Which one? Which chin?
Can you? Yeah. Zing is coming all the way from William Lou.
We've talked about blood and glory. Have you had much blood and sweat splashed onto your face?
Dude, my local dry cleaner, William Lou, has no idea to this very day. My dry cleaner, it's around the corner from me in Sanctuary Lakes. I take in my shirt and suits every other Monday to get dry cleaned because they're normally full of blood. And I always tell him there's blood here, there's blood on here, there's blood on my tie, there's blood here. He's like, what? He goes, what do you do? And I go, mate, it doesn't matter what I do. And it's amazing how many, he always gives me discounts as well. He must think I'm some sort of hitman because I have blood every weekend.
You've got a shaved head and you got a suit, you sit to roll.
Yeah, 100%. Like the worst ever blood I copped, I remember going into a ring once and the fighter was in the corner with his trainer and he was talking to his trainer at the end of the fight and he turns around and like he blows out of his mouth and he had blood all over his lips and all over his, and I reckon 1 trillion particles of blood entered my eyeballs, had it on my nose, had it all over my face. And I walked off and I actually just wiped my face and my arm was covered in blood.
What show was this?
It was a boxing show. It was probably Brian Armatruda show. It was a boxing show, and I was covered in my whole face. My head was just covered in blood. Wow. Thank God the fighters get blood tested out there because I would have been a lot more stressed if that wasn't the case.
This shit wouldn't pass with COVID and whatever's going on right now.
I wonder what's going to change. I fear what's going to change in 2021 with the so-called COVID normal. I hope not much changes for shows, and I hope it's no harder for promoters to put on shows, man, for us next year, because it's going to be really shitty if we can't enjoy the shows as we used to in Melbourne and Australia for that.
It will be a new COVID normal. I think it's something we're going to have to get used to, and then the change won't happen overnight. Everyone just has to just understand what's going on and just be patient.
Yeah, 100%. And mate, promoters, stay tough, man. We're going to be back next year. Have to be.
Definitely.
We got to see shows back in Australia, especially back in Melbourne anyway.
Talking about taking a back seat, not very often do I get to see Johnny Demicoli sitting back enjoying his show with everyone. This was at a Roots show. It was a very chilled event. I really enjoyed doing this show. I love the Roots event. It's very nice, casual feel. What's it like for you sitting back, taking it all in, having a few drinks with Beck and Hammer?
So you can see in the back there's Rebecca to my right. We got Mark the Hammer and the beautiful Dom to his left. We went out for dinner before that show, which was pretty awesome. We went down to a restaurant. I think it was called Donovan's or It was across the road from that venue, that steak restaurant. Great food, great restaurant across the Melbourne Town Hall. Head down there. It's awesome. Tell them Hammer sent you. He's friends with the owners. Hammer knows everyone, by the way.
He knows everybody.
But we had a fair few drinks beforehand, and Sai was very, very kind at the bar with me that night, and I believe I got very drunk. I don't think I remember the main event. It was the first time in a long time I actually could chill out at a show. I never drink alcohol ringside. It's not something I've ever done. It's not something I'll ever do. But to be at a show as a guest was pretty bloody cool. I'm not going to lie to you. I had a great night. I love going to shows. But I think I always relax because I think I'm always so serious at the shows that I actually MC. When I'm not MCing, I really want to enjoy myself and let loose and have a good time.
Would you say serious? I call it more of a focused look. It's like you're switched on, you're ready to go. There's some cue that you got to follow.
Yeah, 100%, man. I'm very focused. I'm very serious when I do my shows. As I said, I have my routine. I don't like breaking that routine for no reason. And I want to make sure I do everything right. But yeah, when I'm at a show as a guest, I love it.
Did you have any work? Were you in work mode at all? Or were you just completely sitting back?
No, that night, I was completely not in work mode. I was having one of the best. That was a great, fun night and had a ball. Not at one point did I actually at one point think I was at work. I was definitely enjoying myself from start to end.
I've only done that once, and it was a great feeling. And people were looking at me weirdly. I think Holly was a ring girl at that show, and she's looking at me thinking, "What are you doing wearing a suit and just going to the corporate box?"
Yeah, it's cool.
It's a cool feeling.
It is cool, and I appreciate getting invited to shows on that. It's really good fun, and I very much let loose on that night. In particular, I apologise to the bar staff for making him work so hard.
This was the main event. This was the debut of Albert Tour Victoria. But you've seen him fight many times in Queensland.
I remember telling. I think I've told. One of the good things about travelling to Perth and Queensland, which I believe are two main parts of Australia for Muay Thai, obviously got Sydney with as well, but I think I worked a lot in Perth and Queensland, and seeing some of these fighters from young age, like in Queensland especially, these guys can fight from a very young age, and these guys can enter their pro when they turn 18 having like 30, 40 fights already, and they're so well prepared. And I remember telling Sai about Albert Tour a long time before he had him on the shows. Like, he's not 18 yet, and there's a fair few I remember telling Sai about George Mann a long time ago. So many good fighters. I mean, you got so many good fighters in Queensland and Perth. Like, it's just awesome. It's awesome to be seeing these kids go from young age to fighting their pro fights, and it's bloody cool. Yeah. I feel very lucky to see them growing up in the sport.
You were in a very lucky position to travel all over, seeing these up-and-comers fight in the hometown.
True.
And then coming to your hometown.
Yes, it's all cool. It's all good.
And what do you call Melbourne? The most livable city in the world?
In future? No, I actually changed that. Where we actually lost the mantle as the most livable city in the world, I actually started saying the sporting capital of the world. I actually moved from the most livable city to the sporting capital of the world. When we get back, man, who knows what? I want to start thinking, it could be the COVID capital. I'm not sure what we're going to say in future, but I'll work out
whatever you say, it will stick.
I love my city of Melbourne. I can't wait to see her back because right now I'm not feeling like it's a normal Melbourne, but it will be back. And Melbourne is the most amazing city to live in. It may not feel like it now, but hopefully it's back sooner than later, I believe.
This was another show you were sitting ringside at. What do you remember from this particular night? This was actually my second year into shooting shows, and the first time me coming to the pavilion, and I heard a lot about the A1 promotions and Tarek Solak. So when I heard he was coming to town, I wanted to get onto the show just for some experience, and it was an experience. I was talking to Steve Oxton about this because he actually fought on the main event. I was sitting on a neutral corner, and I was so close to the pyro fires that was blowing up every round, and I was so scared I was going to get burnt during the fight. But what a night this was! It was
great. Look, growing up, Tarek Solak's shows were the biggest shows in Victoria, and no show has ever come close to what you would have witnessed in the 90s of Tarek's shows. He had shows at the tennis centre that were jam-packed full of people. His shows were huge, and he was always a co-MC. So Tarek would always MC with someone else. Normally, it was a gorgeous female that would be with him. Can't remember the names right now. He left Australia for a very long time. And before I go any further, I just want to give Tarek a shout out. Tarek's very unwell at the moment, and if you can keep him in your prayers, he's going through a very tough time. So Tarek, hope you're handling it well, mate, and love and light, and we wish you all the strength. When Tarek returned to Melbourne, he gave me a call to MC this show. It wasn't quite like MC in a normal sense. It was sort of, I was supposed to do a couple other things. On the night of the show, I MC'd the show. I was really privileged to be a part of the show. It was a big night. It was the first time Tarek was back in Melbourne, I believe, doing a show.
Yeah, there was a big promo behind that too.
Yeah, it was. It was a big night. Is that Masi Nuristani?
That is. Yep.
Against Eric Diamond?
Yep.
Against yes, it is. Yes. Massive. That was a very big night. It was a good night work with Tarek. After that night, I actually didn't work for a Tarek show again. But it was good to work for him for that one night only, as the Dream Girls once said.
That was my experience too, my first and last show. But I was very lucky to have experienced that, and what a spectacle that was.
Yeah, it's a different vibe, man. Like no one can sell. Like, there's no promoter in Melbourne or Australia that sells a show quite like Tarek. Like you actually feel like he was the Don King of Australian kickboxing. Like he was the promoter that would sell the show like no one else. He would pump it up. He'd get on Channel 9. He'd have Eddie Maguire. He'd be on all the news broadcasts back in the 90s. Like he had Gurkhan Ozcan and Stan the Man Longinee like go at it on the news. Like you don't see that anymore. And this guy made kickboxing back in the 90s almost a household sport. Like it was something that you saw often. It probably helped that he had fighters like Stan the Man Longinidis, people that he actually had in his shows and stuff. But he done so well for the sport. And I think Melbourne lost a big icon when he left the sport, and a lot of people like picked up the slack and done a great job. But back in the 90s, man, he was massive. Of course, back in the 90s as well, there was a shows at the Radisson President Hotel, the Blitz Publications fight shows. They were massive as well. Yeah. Like the 90s was a really good time for kickboxing. Like Johnny Sheeter's shows, and Johnny Sheeter's still going now, and Johnny Sheeter and brother Joey. It's the sport has its characters, and so many of these guys have done it for so long, and they become absolute legends in this town.
It was a different time, man.
It was a different time. It was a different time, man. I've seen things.
Moving on to our last photo. Not many people know that you also run a full-time dance studio, and also your dance promotions. Remind me of the name again.
Heavyweight Urban Dance Championships, HUDC.
HUDC, and you actually approached me and Tom Gaffercole to work at this event, and I told you I had no place being here, but you insisted that I work this event with you. Yeah, man, this is the reason, like I told you before, I was going to all these dance comps. These kids train their absolute butts off. They go to dance comps, they pay so in a dance comp, kids pay registration to do it. They pay like $35 just to register, or $50 to register, and they get to a venue, it'd be a basketball court with no lighting, they dance on the floor, people would stand up watching while they sit on plastic chairs. And the people would pay $50 in the audience to sit on a plastic chair to stand. And I was like, and they get medallions for like first place and second place, or a little trophy for first place. And I'm like, man, these kids deserve a lot more. So a colleague of mine and one of our dance teachers, Anna Singleton, we got together and spoke about doing a dance comp. And she gave me an idea. She goes, why don't you do it around your fight background? And I was like, yeah, let's call it heavyweight. We thought of the name. For fast forward, I thought, no, I want to do this proper. It's going to be based on a fight show. So I gave it a fight name. I went to what I believe is the best venue in Victoria for a fight show, being the Pavilion. I got a belt maker to make me proper title belts. So the winners won title belts. Awesome. The kids got equal amount of time on stage. They all got asked questions. The crowds grew. We've done it 3 years in a row. Every year it got bigger and bigger. This year got cancelled, obviously, like everything else has. But yeah, it's been taken to very well. And I think as far as a brand goes, if anybody else comes out and says, we're going to have a fight, we're going to have a dance comp and put belts out, they're going to be like, are you copying heavyweights? Because we're the most original. Like we've got the original branding of having the champions win a belt. So we got weight divisions instead of age divisions. So your youngest divisions are lightweights, and you got welterweights, middleweights, and heavyweights. So it's worked really cool. I love doing it. And the best thing is the look on the children's faces when they walk into the venue and see how amazing it is. It's just a classy venue. It'd be like having it at I think this venue, the Pavilion, is such a classy place to have an event. And it's actually just been renovated. So Brian Armstrong and his team done an amazing job at renovating this place, even making it even better than it looks now. I think Red Scooter reminds me of this place, but at a much smaller. It's like a smaller sister version. Yeah. It's just a classy place to do a show. And yeah, I think HUDC will be back in 2021. Fingers crossed.
I can't wait to get back, man. And our dance school will be back as well. If you got any kids that want to dance, Dance Effects in Ravenhall, check them out. DFX. Cheap plug for the third time today, I think.
You've done too many of them. You've done too many of them. I lost count. But I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to do this. But
today. Who are we sponsored by tonight? Have you got sponsors on this
I need
show?
some sponsors. I'll get some sponsors. Maybe you can help me out.
Yeah, we'll think about it. So my partner in this heavyweight, Anna, she's been doing dance comps for a long time. And she was so skeptical of having someone that wasn't involved in dance as a photographer.
As was I.
As you were, but I knew you could do this because you capture fights and turn it into art. And in my opinion, fighting, dancing, any form of sport, you can turn to art. And I remember you sent us all the photos. She was like, no, don't post the photos until I go through every one of them. I want to make sure there's no crappy photos. Because normally when you get a dance photographer, they'll take 1,000 photos and half of them have got kids' legs that are halfway down here and their eyes are half shut. Your photos were all, she said, she goes, every photo he sent us is perfect to put online. And I'm like, I told you. And Tommy's after video and before video was phenomenal. I think the team, I even had Adam Wilcock doing the videos. It was the fight team in the venue, and it felt so natural to me to be doing this with having the same crew around me. And it made me comfortable as an MC. And these poor families that probably never been to a fighting show and having me as an MC actually announcing each crew as I do the fighters. It's a really, really good, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a good angle to enter the dance competition world in. And it's very original.
It was a great blend using your experience as an MC and also your dance experience.
Even the bell to start off, like they hit that bell and it starts, and it was like really, I had the lighting, because all the lighting rig was set up, and I worked with the lighting guys at the pavilion all the time. It was really cool. So I was really glad it worked so well. It
was seamless, even though it was your first show, being the promoter, announcer, the dance studio owner. It was run so seamlessly. It was like,
I could never become a promoter. I could not promote fight shows for quids. Also, both my brothers currently promote. As an MC, I could never do a fight show, but to be able to still use that energy that I've learned from so many good people, from fight shows, how to run them, to use some of that into my own event was just awesome. And to work with good people, I think your show's only as good as the people around you. And if you surround yourself with good people, being my partner that I do it with, Anna, and the people that we had in the crew, once you're surrounding yourself with good people, you can't do anything but have a good show.
I completely agree, man. Well, Johnny, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate the chat. That's it, mate.
Sweet, man.
We're good.
Pleasure. Peace out. See you soon at next show.
This was fun, man. We should do more of this.
It was good night.